August 2nd, 1943. Blackett Strait in the Solomon Islands. There is no moon. A Japanese destroyer, 2,000 tons of steel, comes out of the dark at close range, and there is no time to turn, no time to fire, no time to shout. It hits an American patrol boat broadside and cuts it in half. 2 men die at the impact. 11 live. 3.5 miles of open water lie between them and the nearest land, and one of them is burned so badly he cannot swim at all. So the boat's commander takes the strap of that man's life vest between his teeth and starts swimming. It takes him 5 hours. 2 years earlier, the United States Army had examined that same man and stamped him 4F. Unfit for service. Bad back, ulcers, asthma. He was only in that water because a friend of his father's had quietly walked his file around the Navy doctors. He was 26 years old. He had already been given the last rites of the Catholic Church once, and he would receive them 3 more times before Dallas. February 20th, 1920. A house in Brookline, Massachusetts. A priest climbs the stairs to a second-floor bedroom to administer last rites to a 2-year-old with scarlet fever. The child does not die. He spends 6 weeks in a Boston hospital and 6 more in isolation in Maine. And he comes home thin and quiet. And that is the shape of the next 40 years. At 13, abdominal pain and an appendectomy, and afterward a deep ache that settles into his knees and never fully leaves. At 17, Yale, New Haven, and then the Mayo Clinic. Fever, jaundice, a rash across his skin, his white blood cells crashing. The doctors run everything they have. Nobody can name it. He writes letters to his friends, making jokes about it, which is what he does with all of it for the rest of his life. Understand what that meant in that particular family. The Kennedys had already chosen a president, and it was not him. Joseph Kennedy Jr. was the eldest, bigger, healthier, better at everything that got measured. He had been told since boyhood that the office was his to take, and he believed it, and so did everyone around him. Jack was the second son, the one in bed with a book, the one who came to the table late or not at all. In a house that kept score, he was the spare. So when the war came and the eldest went to fly, the second son went to a recruiting office and got told no. The Army classified him 4F in the fall of 1941. Bad back, ulcers, asthma, an honest assessment of a genuinely sick young man. But Captain Alan Kirk had served as naval attaché in London under Ambassador Joseph Kennedy, and Kirk was now in naval intelligence, and Kirk pulled the strings that got around the Navy's physicians. In October, John Kennedy was commissioned an ensign. He hated the desk they gave him. He pushed until they let him go to sea, and then he pushed again until they gave him the smallest, fastest, most dangerous thing the Navy had, a plywood torpedo boat. The night of August 1st, 1943, 15 of those boats went into Blackett Strait to intercept a Japanese convoy. It was a badly run operation. The boats fired most of their torpedoes early and lost contact with each other in the dark. By 2 in the morning, PT-109 was drifting on one engine, running quiet, nearly blind. The destroyer Amagiri was making close to 40 knots when it appeared. The crew had perhaps 10 seconds. Harold Marney and Andrew Kirksey were killed at the moment of impact. Say their names, because the story almost never does. The 11 survivors clung to what was left of the bow, while burning gasoline spread across the water. Patrick McMahon, the engineer, had been below when the fuel tanks went, and he was burned over most of his body. When Kennedy decided they had to swim for an island 3.5 miles off, McMahon could not use his arms. So Kennedy took the strap of the man's life vest in his teeth and towed him the entire way. The island they reached was about 100 yards across. No fresh water, no food. For the next several nights, Kennedy swam back out alone into the street with a lantern, treading water in the shipping lane, hoping to flag a passing American boat. None came. On the 6th day, he found a coconut and scratched a message into the husk with a sheath knife. Native knows position. He can pilot. 11 alive. Need small boat. Kennedy. 2 men carried it. Biyuku Gasa and Ironi Kumana were Solomon Islanders, scouts working for the Allies, and they crossed water the Japanese patrolled in a dugout canoe with an American's coconut in the bottom of it. If a patrol had stopped them and found it, they would have been executed. On August 8th, the 11 men came off that island alive. Kennedy received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal and the Purple Heart. The story ran in the New Yorker, then Reader's Digest, and his father made sure copies of it followed his son into every room in American politics for the next 17 years. Gasa and Kumana went home. Gasa wrote the new president a letter after the inauguration to say that it was his joy that Kennedy was now president. Gasa died in 2005. Kumana died on August 2nd, 2014, 71 years to the day after the night in the street. August 12th, 1944. Joseph Kennedy Jr. climbs into a Navy bomber packed with more than 20,000 pounds of high explosive. The plan, called Operation Aphrodite, was to aim the aircraft at a German rocket site, arm it, and parachute out before it flew on by remote control. The explosives detonated early over the English countryside at about 2,000 feet. Kennedy and his co-pilot, Wilford Willey, were killed instantly. There was nothing left to bury. No cause was ever established with certainty. The son who was supposed to be president was gone. Within 2 years, the family had turned to the one who was left, the sick one, the second son. The one who had spent his childhood being given last rites, and put him on a ballot in Massachusetts. 1947, London. A doctor finally puts a name to the thing that had been hunting him since he was a boy: Addison's disease. His adrenal glands were failing. In the years before modern cortisone, That diagnosis was widely understood to be a death sentence, and the prognosis he was given in that room was measured in months. He was given last rites on the voyage home. 1951. On a trip through Asia, a fever spikes to 106. He goes into delirium, then collapse, and a priest is called again. His brother Robert gets him onto a plane to a military hospital on Okinawa. 1954, New York. He elects to have his spine fused, knowing the Addisons makes the operation far more likely to kill him. It nearly does. Infection, then coma, then a priest at the bedside for the 4th time in his life. He spent 5 months on his back and needed a further operation to remove the hardware. When historian Robert Delick was finally given access to the sealed medical files, he found 9 hospitalizations in a stretch of about 2.5 years, vertebrae that had collapsed, and a daily regimen of steroids, painkillers, and stimulants. And the public knew none of it. When the rumors surfaced during the 1960 campaign, the Kennedy operation admitted only to a mild adrenal insufficiency, a phrase chosen precisely so that it was not quite a lie. He used crutches to move through airports and handed them to an aide before he stepped into the light. So consider what he was actually doing in 1960. A Catholic had never been elected president, and the country was not shy about saying why. His answer was to walk directly into the argument. He entered the primary in West Virginia, a state that was about 95% Protestant and poor, and on May 10th, he won it outright. After that, the religious question never fully went away, but it stopped being fatal. On September 26th, he stood in a Chicago television studio opposite Vice President Richard Nixon for the first televised presidential debate in American history. Roughly 70 million people watched, about 2/3 of the electorate, in a country where television had gone from 11% of homes to 88% in a single decade. He wore a dark suit that read cleanly on camera. Nixon, recovering from an illness, wore gray that dissolved into the set. The country had just been handed a new way of measuring a man, and nobody had told the men what it measured. In November, he won by 118,550 votes out of nearly 69 million cast, roughly 1/6 of 1%. It remains one of the closest presidential elections ever held. January 20th, 1961. 22 degrees in Washington. Snow banked along the avenue. He walked out without an overcoat and without a hat, which is the image everyone kept. A young man, apparently made of nothing but health, standing bareheaded in the cold. His spine had collapsed. His adrenal glands had quit. He had been given the last rites of his church 4 times, and he stood there and told the country that the torch had been passed to a new generation of Americans. Read that speech now, and something becomes obvious that was invisible then. He does not promise to finish anything. He talks about work that will not be completed in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, nor perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. He was not describing a term of office.
He was describing a tree whose shade he already knew he would never sit in.
That is the kind of story this channel exists for. The part of the record that got left out because a better-looking version was available. If you want the rest of them, subscribe. Because next time, 13 days in October, when the world came closer to ending than the public was allowed to know, and a plan his own Joint Chiefs put on his desk, a plan to fake attacks on Americans to justify a war, which he read and refused.